Hello again there, folks. This is a reading of my new essay on Substack, which I call Icons of Evil, Old and New, which is something of an expansive response to a bit of a stupid relativistic argument that I saw, contrasting, making the point that because we've had evil people in Britain in the past, there's not really anything to worry about the state of the country now. And I thought it took me into some interesting territory. So I'll begin. Britain has undergone such profound social change within a short time that it is perfectly reasonable to speak of it in terms of a before and after, in the same manner we would describe before the French Revolution and after, before World War One and after, before the Great Plague and after. Liberals will either accept or deny that something had happened to constitute a before and after, depending on whether the framing was positive or negative. If you view the social change negatively, they'll insist that nothing has happened. If you're positive, they will happily agree that changes have occurred to make things better. The effect of the last 30 years or so on the cultural psyche has been like dropping a sledgehammer on a pumpkin. A revolution that everyone feels but which has never been formally declared or elucidated. Yet, regardless of symbols, icons, signs, and touchstones haunt us by not disappearing entirely. Thus, we have the weird juxtaposition of images from before mixed with photos of the after, and the confusion about whether we're still in the same country and culture. Recently, I came across a Liberal using the mugshots of the Moors murderers Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. The point being made was that Brady and Hindley were an example of native evil, and therefore complaining about foreigners committing crimes was hypocritical and racist. It's a dumb and tedious line of reasoning, predictable, mundane. Yet the image lingered in my thoughts as I realised I hadn't seen it in many years. The mugshots of the Moors murderers, convicted for the murders of 5 children in the 1960s, seems like a piece of arcana dredged up from murky, forgotten depths, like finding a cinema ticket to a horror film you'd seen years ago that you'd almost, but not quite, forgotten about. There was the psychopath Ian Brady with his defiance and arrogance. There was his accomplice with her vacant stare and peroxide beehive. Here was the couple that had tortured and killed children. Here was evil. Not evil in the abstract or philosophical sense, but in physical, mundane form. They were not monsters, they were us. They were the postman, the girl who worked in the chippy, the secretary, and the shift manager. Myra Hindley, more than Brady, captured the public imagination because it was commonly accepted that men could be evil, but how could we explain a woman who plays second fiddle to the most barbarous acts being committed against children? As such, Hindley's mugshot embedded itself within the national psyche as a representation of evil, a demon in an increasingly secular, atheistic country. Traditional England had been on the wane, but its death was to Love Me Do by the Beatles. But as yet, the fully functional managerial state, with its science and psychology proffering explanations for everything, had not become fully functional. Like the bodies buried on the moors, which existed neither wholly found nor wholly lost, Hindley occupied a third space between evil incarnate and dysfunctional machine cog. In a society as settled and homogeneous as Greater Manchester was in the 1960s, the Moors murders represented the profoundest betrayal of that trust, and on a scale nigh on incomprehensible to the broader public. Hindley and Brady came to represent not just evil within a secular context, but the outermost extremity of betrayal of the in-group. The endless regurgitation and publication of Myra Hindley's mugshot became akin to an exorcism, a ritualistic lashing of the monster, a purging and ridding ourselves of the devil with the peroxide bouffant. 1995, artist Marcus Harvey reproduced Hindley's image in a work 9 feet wide and 11 feet tall using the handprints of a small child. Needless to say, there was public outrage and the work was repeatedly vandalised. The painting was protected with perspex and security guards were deployed to prevent it from being destroyed. In his defence, Harvey claimed the whole point of the painting is the photograph. The photograph, the iconic power that has come to it as a result of years of obsessive media reproduction. As Harvey implies, there is a Baudrillardian aspect to the overuse of Hindley's mugshot. It is reasonable to say the image became more real and impactful than the actual woman who grew old and sickly in jail. Harvey's work of art was a reproduction of an image endlessly published by the tabloids, itself a mugshot taken at a police station for procedural reasons. But the passage of time, as well as Hindley's unlamented death in 2002, Brady died in 2017, meant that her famous image finally dwindled in the public consciousness. What does Myra Hindley's iconic mugshot mean to a teenager today? What does it mean to a Somali immigrant who arrived last year? A white British teenager has, at least via their parents, a familial and cultural link to that part of recent British history. The Somali immigrant has nothing to do with any of it, either historically, ethnically, or culturally. Thus, we come to the dividing line again, the before and the after. Before, not everything became political. Hindley's hyperreal image was not political. Some more liberal politicians raised the idea of early release or mitigating circumstances, but by and large, Hindley was regarded as a monster by all, with almost no defenders of any political stripe, and nobody had an incentive to do so. From the perspective of 2025, Hindley's image represents a world that no longer exists and that, for millions of people in the country, never existed to begin with. It, can only exist in a homogenous nation with what the regime today calls shared values. In dragging up Hindley's image from the cultural tomb, then relativizing it and politicizing it, the modern liberal is only highlighting how profoundly damaged and shattered the social fabric has become. The new evil. In the New Britain, there is certainly no shortage of sadism, murder, and malice, but there are no icons, no symbolic representations of evil that everyone can agree upon. The tabloids showcase an endless stream of mugshots from grooming gangs and immigrant-descended criminals, but none of them stick. None of them embed themselves in the collective psyche because there is no longer a collective psyche. The Southport killer, Axel Rudakabana, at least has a memorable mugshot, but it is not the woman who could be working in the local pub, a secretary, or even anything relatable. He is not us. He is something entirely alien, the son of a Rwandan immigrant. Moreover, everything surrounding the case was hyper-political. The reasons for his savagery were probably political or at least racial. The response of the police and government and institutions was political and ideological. The riots and the exasperated reaction to his savagery were also political. In the New Britain, we do not feel that an immigrant murderer requires us to purge our own demons because they are not us and share no cultural or metaphysical realm with us. We do not ask what went wrong, but why are they here? And naturally, this sentiment runs against the prevailing orthodoxies and moral codes. In the 2006 ITV drama See No Evil, we witness Hindley gossiping over a cup of tea with her mother and sister, weary Yorkshiremen traversing the fog-smothered moors in search of dead children, and police having a pint and entering the red brick terraced houses of grieving families. We have a frame of reference. We relate. It is us. Axel Rudakabana, or for that matter, Pakistani rape gangs, are behind an alien wall of otherness. They are not internal demons we must purge in any real sense. They're more akin to a marauding band of barbarians. Naturally, then, a political solution is demanded and none is given because the logic of the political class makes no distinction based on human nature and insists we view the world through a dense mist of bureaucratic procedure. It was a bureaucratic procedure that gave rise to the Hindley image. Through repetition, it became a hyperreal signal that elevated Hindley to the status of a demon. In the new fragmented Britain, photos of evildoers do not transcend the realm of bureaucratic data collecting because there is no settled or coherent narrative on the uniqueness or nature of the crime. Indeed, even the public perception is carefully manicured and nudged to ensure that an image remains within acceptable bounds symbolically. In this way, life has become many orders of magnitude less valuable than it was in 1965. So much so that even our means by which we assess and describe evil have had to be compromised. There is no line of continuity between how we conceptualize the worst crimes now and how we did so in the past. In On Power, Bertrand Juvenel writes about how folkish traditions and rituals contained power in its earlier stages by subordinating it to the sacred order. A witch, heretic, or child murderer would have been burned, publicly executed, placed in stocks, and so on. And sovereign power would have stood aloof or turned a blind eye because it did not wish to interfere with acts of communal catharsis. In these times, Myra Hindley would have been burned at the stake, and somebody such as Peter Sutcliffe would have faced an even worse fate. The transformation of Hindley, the Bulger killers, or Sutcliffe into icons of evil is perhaps a faint echo of this sentiment within the managerial state of postmodernity. They become ciphers, signs, or something far older. Consider then that when Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived to pay his respects to the three girls murdered by Axel Rudolph at Southport, he was jeered at and booed by the crowds, despite only recently having become Prime Minister. The crowd perceived the state and Axel Rudolph as one entity, and it is difficult to argue otherwise given that the state was responsible for the Rudolph family's presence in Britain. At Southport, the police lined up to protect the state, not the monster. When a new atrocity occurs, there is no communal right of expulsion, only reports, inquiries, lessons learned, and careful media management to prevent community tensions. The monster is never fully cast out because the state cannot admit there is an outside it does not control. Evil is folded back into the system as data. This is the true nature of the before and after. Evil is not wearing a bleach blonde beehive with a vacant stare. It wears a well-cut suit and carries a pre-prepared bullet points, convenient for institutional power that has taken upon itself the role of shaman, priest, church, and temple. Thanks for listening, folks.